They say if you drive the back roads after midnight, you might pick up a passenger who doesn't belong to this world. It's one of the most famous urban legends whispered across towns and retold for decades. But the strange thing is, every town swears it happened there. The story begins on a quiet two-lane road. A man is driving home late from work. The night is colder than usual, his breath fogging in the car as he drums his fingers on the steering wheel. Then he sees her, a young woman standing by the roadside dressed in white. Her face is pale, her expression unreadable. She raises her hand, asking for a ride. He slows down. Something in his gut tells him it's not right, but he pulls over anyway. She slides into the back seat without a word. The driver glances in the mirror, trying to catch her eye. "Cold night, isn't it?" he says, but she doesn't answer. The only sound is the tires humming against the pavement. A few minutes later, the driver steals another glance into the mirror. The back seat is empty. The girl in white is gone. Panicked, he pulls over and searches the car. Nothing. Doors locked, windows up, but the seatbelt buckle is still warm, as if someone had just been sitting there. Shaken, he continues on. Later, he mentions the encounter to a local police officer. The officer stares at him for a long moment and then quietly says, "You're not the first." Some say she was the victim of a car accident decades earlier, a young bride on her way to her wedding. Others insist she's a spirit that warns drivers to slow down on dangerous curves. There are even claims that she leaves something behind, a single glove, a veil, or just the faint scent of flowers in the back seat. Drivers say the air turns icy cold, heavy in their chest. And here's the part that unsettles everyone. No matter where you hear the story, Illinois, Texas, Finland, the Philippines, the details are always the same. A pale woman, a late-night ride, and then nothing. Some believe it's proof that the Vanishing Hitchhiker isn't a story at all, but a real phenomenon. A restless spirit appearing wherever roads meet tragedy. A ghost who climbs into strangers' cars searching for the destination she never reached in life. Others say it's just folklore, a story drivers tell themselves when their headlights catch a shadow that isn't really there. But ask anyone who's driven those roads alone, with nothing but the sound of tires and the cold night pressing in. Ask the ones who swear they felt someone sitting in the back seat watching them before vanishing into thin air. The scariest part isn't the ghost. It's knowing one night you might be the next driver to pick her up. And that was only the beginning, because not every ghost waits on the side of the road. Some already live in the places we visit every day. Not every ghost waits by the roadside. Some stay in the places where life and death crossed paths every day. Abandoned hospitals are among the most unsettling places you can walk into. Cold halls, peeling paint, silence broken only by the wind. But sometimes people say the buildings aren't empty at all. Take the story of St. Agnes Hospital. Once a bustling ward filled with patients and doctors, it was shut down decades ago. Locals warned against going inside, but urban explorers couldn't resist. They carried flashlights, cameras, and the thrill of trespassing. The first thing they noticed was the smell: stale air, mold, and something metallic like rust. The long hallways echoed with every step, their beams of light catching broken wheelchairs, overturned beds, and faded medical charts scattered on the floor. One explorer, Kyle, swore he heard a child's laughter. The group froze, scanning the hallway. They were alone, or so they thought. They pressed on, climbing to the second floor where the pediatric ward used to be. That's when one of them captured a shadow on camera. Tall, thin, standing in the doorway of a room at the end of the hall. But when they rushed toward it, the room was empty. The temperature dropped, their breath became visible. And then the sound returned. Not laughter this time, but the slow squeak of wheels rolling down the corridor. A wheelchair was moving on its own, rolling steadily toward them. They ran, stumbling down the stairs, the squeak echoing behind them. Kyle looked back and swore he saw a nurse at the top of the staircase. Her uniform was old-fashioned, her face pale, her eyes hollow, watching as they fled. Locals say the hospital is cursed, that the spirits of patients still wander the halls, confused and restless. Some claim to see doctors making their rounds. Others swear a nurse still patrols the night shift. The most chilling reports come from those who didn't believe the legends until they visited. They talk about feeling watched, hearing whispers or glimpsing figures in broken windows or shards of mirror. One visitor described standing in front of a shattered mirror and seeing someone walk past behind him, though he was completely alone. Skeptics call it tricks of the mind, drafts pushing objects, echoes creating voices, flashlights catching dust. But for those who've been inside, the fear feels too real, and sometimes the haunting doesn't stop when you leave. Visitors report footsteps in their homes, faint hospital beeps echoing at night, or waking to see a pale nurse at the foot of their bed. It makes you wonder, what if some spirits don't just haunt the place they died? What if they follow the living instead? Because not all nightmares happen in abandoned buildings. Some find you where you feel safest, even in your own bedroom. What's worse than a nightmare? Waking up and realizing it's still in the room with you. For centuries, people across the world have told the same terrifying story. They wake in the dead of night, unable to move, their chest pinned by something heavy. They try to scream, but their voice won't work. And then they see it, a shadowy figure standing at the foot of the bed. Doctors call it sleep paralysis, a glitch between dreaming and waking. But for the people who've lived it, the experience feels far too real. Take one account from a woman in Texas. She woke to find her body frozen, her breathing shallow. At first she thought it was a dream. Then she noticed the figure in the corner. It's all dark, its head brushing the ceiling. It moved closer, each step slow and deliberate, until it stood right beside her bed. She swore she felt the mattress dip as if something had sat down. But when she forced her eyes shut, a voice whispered in her ear, "Don't move." Moments later, she snapped awake, able to move again. The figure was gone. But the weight on her chest, the whisper in her ear, it all felt too real to dismiss. She isn't alone. Across cultures, the shadow has many names. The night demon, the shadow man. In Japan, it's called kanashibari. In Newfoundland, it's being hag-ridden. Different names, but the same experience: paralyzed, watched, and haunted. Skeptics say it's the brain misfiring, hallucinations caused by the boundary between sleep and wakefulness. But the details are what disturb believers. How can so many people, in so many different places, describe the same figure? Some researchers believe the shadow feeds on fear, appearing in the same form across cultures because the human brain recognizes it as a universal nightmare. Others suggest something darker, that sleep paralysis isn't just a medical glitch, but a moment when the veil between worlds thins and something else slips through. And then there are the stories that go beyond paralysis. People who claim the shadow followed them into waking life. They see it out of the corner of their eye during the day, feel it watching from doorways, or dream of it night after night until sleep itself becomes terrifying. Imagine lying in bed convinced you're safe, only to wake and see eyes glowing in the corner. Imagine gasping for breath while something unseen presses down on your chest. And imagine wondering, what if it's not just your mind? What if something truly is in the room with you? Because the scariest part of the shadow isn't the moment it appears. It's the thought that it might never leave. And if you think your nightmares can't hurt you, remember, some stories prove otherwise. Everyone laughs about haunted dolls until you own one. For one family, the nightmare began after inheriting an old porcelain doll from a relative. Its face was cracked but smiling, its glass eyes so lifelike they seemed to follow you across the room. At first, it was just a decoration on a shelf. But soon, strange things began to happen. The daughter swore she left the doll facing the wall, only to find it staring at her bed the next morning. The parents brushed it off as imagination, until the father himself noticed something worse. The doll's hands had shifted. One evening, its porcelain fingers were curled closed. The next morning, they were outstretched. Then came the accidents. A lamp toppled with no one near it. A door slammed in an empty room. And every time, the doll was there, sitting calmly as if it had been watching the whole time. One night, the daughter woke to a soft tapping sound. When she turned on her lamp, the doll was sitting on her desk, though her parents swore it had been in the living room hours earlier. No one admitted to moving it. Terrified, the family locked the doll in a wooden chest and shoved it in the attic. For a while, things were quiet. But weeks later, the mother went upstairs and found the chest wide open. The doll was sitting upright in the middle of the floor. Visitors to the home often remarked how uneasy they felt near it. Some claimed to hear faint whispers when alone in the room. One guest said the doll blinked. Another swore its head tilted just slightly when no one touched it. Skeptics argue it's all psychology, that the human brain is wired to find faces even in lifeless objects, and fear builds from suggestion. But believers point to the long history of dolls in folklore, often tied to spirits or curses. After all, what better vessel for a wandering soul than a human shape with empty eyes? The family eventually donated the doll to a paranormal museum, where it sits behind glass to this day. Staff say visitors report the same eerie sensation, the feeling of being watched. Some refuse to enter the room at all, and maybe that's the true terror of dolls. They're meant to look alive, but not too alive. When they cross that line, when the eyes seem to track you, when the smile feels too knowing, it makes you wonder, is it just porcelain and paint? Or something inside, waiting to be seen? Because from the road to the hospital, from your own bedroom to the toys in your home, horror finds a way in. The question is, would you survive it? Everyone knows the game. Lights off, candle lit, stand before a mirror and whisper a name. Most people laugh, waiting for nothing to happen. But some swear something always does. A group of friends tried it at a sleepover. They giggled as they chanted, but when the final word left their lips, the candle flickered violently. In the glass, their reflections didn't move in sync. One girl swore her reflection smiled even though her own mouth stayed shut. The others laughed, brushing it off, until the mirror cracked with a sound like a scream. The candle went out, and when the lights flicked back on, a wet handprint was smeared across the inside of the glass. Some say the spirit in the mirror isn't trapped at all, it's waiting. Waiting for a crack, a slip, a moment when it can cross over. And once it knows your face, it never forgets. Because sometimes the most dangerous reflection is your own. But not every haunting hides behind glass. Some are locked behind doors no one dares to open. Travelers love ghost stories about old hotels. But some hotels don't just have legends, they hide them. Room 6B was always under renovation. Guests never stayed there. But some swore they heard noises from inside. The sound of water dripping, footsteps pacing, and faint sobbing through the walls. One night, a guest demanded the key, refusing to believe in superstitions. The clerk hesitated, then handed it over. Hours later, the guest stumbled into the lobby, pale and shaking. He swore someone was in the room with him. The bathroom faucet turned on by itself, and when he looked in the mirror, a man stood behind him, grinning. But when staff rushed up, the room was empty. Dust thick on the bed, no sign of anyone staying there for years. The guest checked out that night and never returned. Today, the door is nailed shut. But if you pass it in the hallway, some say you still hear the faint drip of water and a laugh on the other side. And sometimes it isn't rooms that trap spirits, it's whole places, caught replaying their own tragedies. Near an old railway crossing, locals warn travelers not to linger after dark. They say the tracks remember. Decades ago, a passenger train derailed there, scattering wreckage and lives into the night. Since then, strange things have happened. People hear the screech of brakes when no train is scheduled. Headlights blaze down the tracks only to vanish before impact. One witness described standing near the tracks when the ground began to shake. He heard screams, felt a rush of wind, and saw carriages filled with pale faces speeding past. But when he turned, the tracks were empty. Others say phantom conductors in soot-stained uniforms still walk the line, lanterns glowing faintly in the dark. The crash repeats itself over and over, as if time itself is scarred. Skeptics dismiss it as imagination. But the locals will tell you, if you stand there long enough, you'll hear the echo of tragedy. And if the lights rush toward you, don't move. Step aside because some trains never stop. But not all visitors come with engines and wheels. Some arrive on your doorstep and they look like children. It starts with a knock at your door late at night. Two children stand there, heads lowered. Their voices are polite, almost too polite. Can we come in? We need to use the phone. But something feels wrong. When they finally look up, their eyes are nothing but black. No iris, no white, just endless darkness. Stories say if you let them in, misfortune follows. Electronics fail, pets panic, and days later, something terrible happens in the household. Survivors describe an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the children weren't human at all, but something using their shape. One man swore they stood on his porch knocking for hours. He never opened the door, but the next morning, tiny wet footprints trailed across his kitchen floor. The doors were still locked. No one knows what they are, demons, aliens, lost souls. But if you hear a knock after midnight and polite little voices beg to be let inside, don't answer. And sometimes the voices you hear aren't even at your door. They call from the woods begging you to follow. Campers often talk about strange sounds at night, branches snapping, coyotes howling. But the most unsettling sound of all, a baby crying in the middle of the forest. Hikers have reported it for years. At first it sounds distant, a faint wail growing louder, pulling you off the path. Instinct makes you want to follow. After all, who would leave a child alone in the woods? But those who did swear the sound led them deeper, twisting their sense of direction. Some never found the source. Others said the crying suddenly stopped, replaced by laughter. One group described reaching a clearing where the sound was deafening. The moment they stepped inside, the crying cut off. The woods fell silent. Then something growled low from the shadows. Folklore says it's not a baby at all, but something luring you in. A predator mimicking innocence. Some believe it's tied to spirits of children lost long ago. Others say it's older, something that's always lived in the dark. Whatever it is, the warning is clear. If you hear a baby crying in the woods at night, don't go looking, because it might be looking for you. But tricks of sound are only the beginning. Sometimes the danger lies in objects we invite into our own homes. It arrived in a wooden crate with no return address, an oil painting of a boy standing in a doorway. The brushwork was realistic, eyes too alive. The gallery owner hung it in a side room and left for the night. By morning, the boy wasn't in the doorway anymore. He stood one step closer to the frame, hand lifted as if testing the glass. The owner blamed fatigue, checked security footage, and saw nothing. The painting never moved, but the boy's position had changed. Customers complained the room felt cold. One woman fainted, later saying the boy whispered her name. The owner rehung the piece, then found tiny smudges inside the frame as if small fingers had pressed from within. When the lights were off at closing, footsteps tapped the gallery floor. In the morning, the boy was closer again, head tilted, mouth parted as if about to speak. Desperate, the owner wrapped the painting and locked it in storage. But that night, something thumped against the crate. Then a dragging sound like a hand searching for a seam. Some paintings capture a moment, others capture you. But not every curse hangs on a wall. Some wait behind a door the staff swore would stay shut. It looked like any other number, 11 digits no one recognized. It called late, always after midnight. If you answered, a voice you loved spoke on the other end. A parent, a partner, a friend you'd lost. They sounded close, like they were standing in your kitchen. They said your name the way only they did. They asked you to come outside, just for a moment. People who picked up reported the same details. The caller knew private things, used pet names, repeated inside jokes. Some swore they could hear traffic that matched their street. When they didn't go outside, the voice turned flat. Then it said, next time. Those who blocked the number got messages instead. Blank voicemails, static with faint breathing. A few received texts that were just coordinates. A spot by the river, a bend in the road, a doorway they passed every day. A tech tried to trace the calls. They didn't come from a tower. They didn't come from anywhere at all. The number existed only when it rang. Maybe it wasn't a phone call. Maybe it was something that learned your voice by listening to your grief. And if a voice can find you through a wire, imagine what a melody can do when it slips out of a box that winds itself. It was a brass music box with a cracked enamel lid, wind the key, and it played a lullaby just out of tune. 3 notes sweet, the 4th sour, like a smile that didn't reach the eyes. A couple found it at an estate sale and set it on their bedroom dresser. That night it played on its own at 3:03 a.m., the same crooked melody repeating until the key should have run out. When they touched the box, it was cold as ice. Over the next week, the song crept into their lives. It echoed in the bathroom vent, hummed under the TV's static, rang faintly when the house was quiet. They started to hear a second sound too, soft footsteps keeping time with the tune. One night the husband woke to the box open on its hinge, the tiny ballerina turning. But someone had scratched the metal drum inside, adding new notes. The melody had changed. The next morning, long, thin scratches marked the dresser top like fingernails keeping rhythm. They tried to throw it away. The trash truck took it and the house was silent for a day. Then the melody returned, louder, drifting from the attic, where the music box sat on a beam, lid closed, key slowly winding itself. Some songs are invitations, some are promises. This one was both. But melodies aren't the only things that mirror us. Sometimes the reflection lies. It was a tall Victorian mirror, gilt frame browned with age. The seller warned, half joking, "We never keep it uncovered at night." The new owner laughed and set it in the hallway anyway. At first it seemed like any mirror, until people started noticing delays. You raised your hand. Your reflection followed a heartbeat later. Your smile lingered after your face went neutral. One evening, the owner walked by and saw himself standing still in the glass, staring, even though he was already halfway down the hall. When he stepped back, the reflection didn't move. Then it tilted its head and smiled. Wide, wrong, teeth too many. He covered the mirror with a sheet. That night, footsteps tapped from inside the frame. The next morning, a handprint bloomed on the fabric, on the inside of the cover. He tried to sell it, but buyers backed out, complaining they felt watched. A priest suggested blessing the house. The water beaded on the frame and slid upward. Finally, he wrapped the mirror in tarp and took it to the curb. When he returned, it stood where it had always been, uncovered, its surface a depthless black. His reflection wasn't there anymore. Someone else stared out. Someone wearing his clothes, someone waiting. Mirrors show possibilities. Some try to make them real. But sometimes the scariest reflection isn't in glass at all. It's in the life you thought you shared. They moved in together in August. 2 friends splitting rent, sharing dishes, leaving notes on the fridge. For months it was ordinary. Then one Tuesday, the narrator woke and the apartment felt wrong. Too quiet, too clean. Her roommate's door was open. Bed made, closet empty. Toothbrush gone. Every photo that included her had a blank space where her body should have been. The arm around her now hugging nothing. Her phone showed text threads with names but no messages. The landlord swore only one person lived there. The lease listed a single tenant. Mutual friends looked confused and said they hadn't seen that person at any party ever. The narrator opened her banking app. Every split bill payment was her own transfer sent to herself. She tore the place apart and found 3 things: a strand of hair on the couch, a hoodie that smelled like someone else's detergent, and a note under the fridge magnet that read, "Don't forget the rent." The handwriting didn't match hers. That night, she woke to someone moving in the kitchen. A cabinet opened, a glass set on the counter. She called her roommate's name on instinct and heard an answering voice to us from the empty hall. Some people don't leave, they're erased. And sometimes, the life you're living adjusts around the hole they leave until only you remember. Erase a person, change a painting, teach a mirror to lie. Curses twist reality. But some things don't bother with tricks, they knock. They say if you see yourself outside your body, it's a bad omen. The word is doppelganger. A double identical in every detail, but empty inside. One woman swore she saw her husband walk past the kitchen doorway while she was cooking. She called out, but he didn't answer. Seconds later, the real husband walked in from outside, holding groceries. He froze when she told him what she'd seen. Others described their doubles standing silently in corners, smiling faintly but never speaking. Some say the doppelganger mirrors their every move, but just slightly off, like a puppet with a broken string. Folklore warns that meeting your double means illness or death. Modern theories call it hallucination. But there are too many accounts where tragedy followed. So the question is, if you ever saw yourself across the room, would you look away or watch long enough to see if it blinks? And sometimes what hides in the shadows isn't you. It's something waiting below. Every old house has a basement, and every basement feels the same. Damp air, low ceilings, and the weight of being underground. But for one family, the basement was more than unsettling. It was alive. They first noticed scratches on the inside of the basement door. Long gouges too high for the dog. At night, they heard whispers rising through the vents, soft but urgent like someone calling from below. The father dismissed it until the youngest son refused to sleep. He swore he saw pale hands reaching up through the floorboards, clawing toward his bed. One night, the father went down with a flashlight. The beam caught something crouched in the corner, eyes reflecting like an animal's. He dropped the light, and when he picked it back up, the corner was empty. But the smell of damp earth lingered. The family sealed the door and moved within a month. New tenants opened the basement to store boxes. The first night, they called the landlord, asking about the scratching sounds. Some houses keep secrets, others keep residents. And not all residents live below. Some press their faces to the glass, staring in from where no one should stand. A man rented a small second-floor apartment. Every night he noticed a pale woman watching from the building across the street. She stood at the same window, unmoving, hands folded, eyes fixed on his. At first he thought she was curious. Then he realized something impossible. The apartment she watched from was abandoned. Boarded up, no electricity. One night he flashed his light toward her. She didn't flinch. She raised her hand and waved slowly. He froze. Then, in his own apartment, from the dark kitchen window behind him, another hand waved back. Neighbors say they've seen her too, pale, silent, appearing in upper windows of empty buildings, always staring, always waiting. Some claim she isn't a ghost but a harbinger, marking those she watches, because once she waves, you're already hers. But the most terrifying visitors aren't strangers. Sometimes they look exactly like the ride you thought ended hours ago. In Navajo legend, skinwalkers are witches who wear the skins of animals, shifting shapes at will. But their most terrifying trick is the voice. Campers in the Southwest report it, a friend's voice calling from the trees. Come here, but the friend is sitting beside them. The voice grows louder, more insistent, always a little wrong, like a recording played back slowly. One hunter described hearing his brother call from the ridge. When he looked, he saw a figure waving, but the figure's arms bent backward at the elbows, joints bending the wrong way. Others tell of coyotes walking on two legs or deer with human eyes. And when the stories overlap, when strangers report the same impossible movements, you start to wonder if it's more than legend. The elders say never answer when your name is called at night. Never follow the sound, no matter how familiar. Because if you do, you'll never return as yourself. And if voices in the dark can twist reality, imagine the hunger of something that's haunted winters for centuries. In the frozen forests of the north, whispers tell of the Wendigo, a skeletal giant, taller than trees with sunken eyes and a mouth too wide. It is said to be born of hunger, once human, cursed after consuming flesh in desperate winters. Hunters tell of hearing branches crack when no animal stirs. A smell of rot carries on the wind, stronger with every step. One man swore he saw a figure lean out from between the pines, thin with antlers like twisted branches and teeth gleaming in the moonlight. The Wendigo is never full. Its body stretches gaunt and endless, stomach growling even as it feeds. Some say its voice mimics loved ones, luring travelers deeper into the snow. Others say once you hear it calling your name, it's already too late. Legends claim its shadow marks you, following for days until exhaustion drives you into the cold. Survivors describe finding claw marks in the snow that stretch for miles, leading nowhere. The Wendigo isn't just a monster, it's hunger itself, endless hollow. And in the silence of winter nights, when the wind howls through the trees, people still whisper, it's out there, waiting. But hunger isn't the only curse. Sometimes the horror follows you home in ways you can't explain. Late-night TV once signed off, leaving only static. But some families claimed the static wasn't empty at all. One boy woke to the sound of voices whispering from the living room. On the TV, a blank channel of white noise. In the static, he swore he saw faces shifting, mouths opening and closing, eyes staring directly at him. His parents laughed until they saw it too. The more they watched, the clearer the faces became. One night, the whispers turned into words. Let us in. They unplugged the set. Still, the screen glowed faintly, static pulsing like a heartbeat. By morning, the TV was gone. In its place sat a trail of black footprints leading into the kitchen. Some say the static wasn't noise, it was a door. And someone finally answered. Screens aren't the only things that watch us. Sometimes the watchers knock. A farmer's family kept hearing knocks at their door just before midnight. 3 taps, always slow, always steady. One night the father waited, shotgun ready. At midnight, 3 knocks, he swung the door open, nothing. Just the empty yard. But in the dirt, fresh footprints stopped at the threshold, facing inward. They sprinkled flour across the porch. The next night, the knocks came again. This time, the flour showed footprints, small like a child's, but with claws. When the father refused to answer, the knocks grew louder, faster until the wood cracked. The family huddled inside, praying for dawn. At sunrise, the door was untouched except for a message carved into the frame. Next time open. Not all visitors want entry. Some want the invitation. And sometimes what enters isn't knocking, it's already inside. In an old inn, guests complained of the same dream. They woke in the night to find themselves lying in a strange room. Walls crimson, floor slick. A woman stood in the corner, head bent, whispering words they couldn't understand. When they woke, they were back in their bed. But bruises formed on their wrists, shaped like fingers. One man decided to investigate. He asked for the room from his dream, but the clerk looked confused. No such room existed. That night, he dreamed again. Only this time, when he opened his eyes, he was still in the red-walled chamber. The woman lifted her head and her mouth opened far too wide. He was never seen again. The inn burned down years later, but some who camp near the ruins still dream of crimson walls and a whisper they can't forget. And if a room can remember, imagine a whole house designed to never let go. It began as a small cabin, but every time the owner left, he returned to find something new. An extra hallway, a staircase leading nowhere, a door he didn't remember. Soon the house grew labyrinthine, rooms stretching at impossible angles. Windows looked out into darkness even at noon. The owner tried sealing doors, but new ones appeared. Behind them, whispers or worse, empty rooms that breathed like lungs. Visitors got lost inside, unable to find the exit. One swore the house rearranged itself while she walked, corridors folding and stretching. Another claimed he saw himself at the end of a hallway, older, gaunt, waving before vanishing. Eventually the owner fled, but the house kept growing, swallowing the land. Today it stands abandoned, but locals warn against entering. They say the house is still building, waiting for more residents. Because sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't a haunted home, it's one that's alive. You've heard the stories. 20 tales whispered through time, of roads that remember, of shadows that breathe, of hunger that never ends. Some say they're legends, folklore, just words carried by firelight and fear. But legends don't survive this long without teeth. They don't carve themselves into memory unless there's truth hidden beneath. Think back. Which one unsettled you most? The doll with watching eyes? The cry that lured you into the woods? The reflection that smiled when you didn't? They aren't bound to a page or a screen, they're patient. Waiting in mirrors and walls, in the silence between heartbeats, waiting for someone to notice, someone like you. Because horror doesn't always announce itself with claws and screams. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it knocks 3 times at your door when you're sure no one's there. And here's the truth no one wants to admit. You don't choose the story that finds you. The story chooses you. So as you leave this anthology, listen closely. To the footsteps in the hall. To the voice that calls your name at night. To the silence that feels too heavy, as if it's holding its breath. 20 doors have opened tonight. The question isn't whether you believe them. The question is now, which one followed you home?